President Muhammadu Buhari receives letters of credence from 3 envoys, calls for more collaboration against climate change.
The Senate moves to protect Nigerians from unsolicited adverts by telecom operators.
All the identified agents that participated in the suspended primary election of 5th of May 2018 are disqualified from participating in the rescheduled primaries as agents or in any other capacity.
APC cancels Ekiti governorship primaries, reschedules fresh one for Friday this week.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall revisit the fight against drug abuse and addiction.
We shall also discuss Nigeria and the Open Government Partnership Initiative. For many years now, Nigeria has been battling drug trafficking, sale and abuse with varying levels of successes. The fight is also not without challenges.
Now, the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, which is saddled with the responsibility of stopping drug trafficking and abuse, has at various times adopted strategies aimed at dealing with the situation.
Large quantities of drugs of different kinds have been seized, while many suspects have either been arrested, prosecuted, or even convicted by the courts. However, the battle is far from being won, as more cases of drugs have continued to emerge.
In 2017 alone, the NDLEA, that's the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, seized a whopping 309,000 kilograms of drugs of different kinds, with cannabis and tramadol accounting for over 90%. Now, other drugs seized included cough syrup with codeine, cocaine, heroin, meth, and opioids, among others.
Now, these drugs are consumed by people of all ages, particularly youths, who, according to the data from the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, constitute the larger number of users. And this perhaps explains the connection between youth and delinquencies, organized crimes, gangsterism, kidnapping, and other social vices.
Now, while the attention of the relevant agencies is focused on the familiar terrain, the emerging danger is from the use and abuse of prescription drugs that have become an avenue for drug abuse. Now, it's also indicated that many pain relievers have seen an increase in patronage due to what experts say is linked to abuse.
Now, the latest worrying one is the cough syrup with codeine, which has seen astronomical consumption and abuse by young people and women across the country. Indeed, many call it a ticking time bomb.
That's right, Joy. So this morning we shall again revisit the issue of drug abuse and addiction in Nigeria as we look at how the situation is being tackled. One question to ask is the battle being won?
Pertinent question, Kingsley. But we shall also ask about the issue of rehabilitation of those already addicted. Is there any hope for them? What can families and society do to arrest the situation? These and other questions we shall try to provide answers to on this edition of Good Morning Nigeria, here on the Nigerian Television Authority, Africa's largest television network. I am Joy Usiago.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I also welcome you to the program, in the course of which we shall have our regular companion segments, including newspaper review, business, sports, and others. In the meantime, we are kicking off right now with the morning highlights, that's of the news, with our colleague, Ogwa Vivian Oyedibe. Hi, Ogwa.
Hi, Kingsley. Good morning, Joy. Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to the news. Nigeria has made a case for sustained financial, technical and capacity building support from the international community towards mitigating the adverse effects of climate change in the country. President Muhammadu Buhari made this known while receiving letters of credence from 3 new envoys, the ambassadors of Netherlands and Lebanon, as well as the High Commissioner of Botswana, posted to Nigeria on tour of duty. President Muhammadu Buhari said the federal government will vigorously pursue the replenishment of Lake Chad through various means, including an option of inter-basin water transfer from the Ubangi River in Central Africa. Meanwhile, President Muhammadu Buhari has arrived in London, the British capital, on a 4-day visit. While in London, the president is expected to see his doctor, who earlier requested the visit. President Buhari is expected back on Saturday to keep a date with his 2-day state visit to Jigawa on Monday and Tuesday next week. And away from that, the House of Representatives as Tuesday's plenary passed at second reading a bill for an act to repeal the Terrorism Prevention Act of 2011 to enact the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Bill.
We now have the offense of hostage taking, kidnapping and hijacking as parts of the offenses included in the acts of terrorism in the Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Bill.
Seeks to incorporate the relevant sections on terrorism in one bill.
The issue of bail, the issue of fair hearing for even the accused persons is very, very important. It's a matter for the prosecuting agencies, and I hope that this will also be incorporated in this law.
We must incorporate the human rights angle into this bill.
They must consider in the nitty-gritty of the bill how we can take care of our borders that are porous.
Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against it say nay. Ayes have it. Bill is referred to Committee on National Security and Intelligence.
And to politics now. Last weekend's inconclusive All Progressives Congress governorship primary election in Ekiti State has been cancelled, and a fresh exercise will be conducted on Friday, 11th May 2018 in Ado Ekiti. National Publicity Secretary of the party, Bolaji Abdullahi, who addressed the media on the outcome of the National Working Committee meeting, says Governor Umaru Tankwa Omakura-led primary election committee is to continue with the exercise.
Identified agents that participated in the suspended primary election of 5th of May 2018 are disqualified from participating in the rescheduled primaries as agent or in any other capacity in the rescheduled primaries.
Meanwhile, the national leader of the All Progressives Congress and former governor of Lagos State, Senator Ahmed Bola Tinubu, has met with the party's aspirants in Ekiti State governorship tussle. At the end of the closed-door meeting, APC stalwart Chief Bisi Akonde told newsmen that the meeting was geared towards strengthening the party.
But all we want is the happiness of the generality of the party leadership, the contestants, and our party. We are going to talk to the party about what the aspirants and ourselves, thought was best, and we know the party will take a right decision.
And still on Ekiti, the Deputy Governor of the state, Professor Kolakpo Olushola Eleka, has emerged the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, in the 2018 governorship election in Ekiti State, following the conduct of the party primary in Ado Ekiti. Professor Eleka had 1,191 out of the 1,968 valid votes cast to beat Prince Adebayo Adeyeye, who scored 770 votes at the primary. Ayodeji Ogunshaki reports that one of the aspirants, Senator Biodu Olujimi, stepped down before the commencement of the exercise. And that's the news for now. Good morning, Nigeria. We'll be back with Joy and Kinsley after this break.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem frontally through revival of agriculture.
30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Reorganized, trained, and fully equipped, we are the new improved Nigeria Police Force. We fight crime, we bust syndicates. Whatever the crime, wherever the hideout, the Nigeria Police Force will get you busted. Stop kidnapping, armed robbery, murder, pipeline vandalism, and other criminal activities. Be productive. Be security conscious. Join the police force to secure your life and property. This message is from the Nigeria Police Force Public Relations Department.
There are many ways to get rich, but is whistleblowing one of them?
Flash boy must hear this.
Is the whistleblower blowing to make our country a better place? Is he blowing to take authorities on a wild goose chase?
As I'm living here now, going to comb everywhere.
Is he blowing to take a chance on wealth?
We need to move fast before those bags are moved out of the house.
And perchance strike gold.
Is it only politicians? What of armed robbers and kidnappers?
They talk about bushmeat, you talk about lizard.
Join your lovely cast of your rib-cracking comedy, Professor Jambul, in this episode titled Trumpet Blowers. Find out why the whistle blows and laugh like never before.
Not to say I don't really see any politician go achieve that kind of money. I just think I can't yarn you in advance.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network, Glow Unlimited.
NTA Television College, an affiliate of Ahmadu Bello University Zaria, has over the years maintained her reputation of putting together courses that are highly relevant to manpower needs of the broadcast industry. The college is again organizing a 4-week course on English grammar and pronunciation for broadcasters, slated for 21st May to 15th June 2018. Come and take advantage of our top-notch and intensive course designed to grow the skills of television presenters, script writers, news editors, journalists, hosts of live events in just 4 weeks. Venue, multipurpose complex, NTA Television College, Rayfield, Jos. Fee is 100,000 naira per participant, accommodation inclusive. Be there. NTA Television College, Jos, training you to be the best you can be.
For some business news now, IMF warns of rising African debt as 10-man World Bank delegation arrived Nigeria to hold talks with Vice President Yemi Osinbajo. Details with Comfort Amodu.
Good to have you join me on Business News. I'm Comfort Amodu. In the news today, a 10-man delegation from the World Bank is in Nigeria to meet with the Vice President Yemi Osinbajo and other key government officials over the bank's projects in the country. The delegation will also meet with the organized private sector in Lagos and undertake a tour of Azura Power Plant in Edo State and Lapo Microfinance Bank project in Lagos State. In other business developments, the International Monetary Fund says sub-Saharan Africa may experience rise in debt following the increase in borrowing and gap in deficits in spite of an overall increase in economic growth. The IMF, in its economic outlook for the region released in Accra, Ghana, projected the economic expansion to 3.4% this year from 2.8% in 2017. boosted by global growth and higher commodity prices. Slower growth in South Africa and Nigeria, the continent's two largest economies, weighed on the region. Wide average, but the IMF expects growth to pick up in around 2/3 of African nations. However, under the current policies, the rate is expected to flatten below 4% over the medium term. The Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment, Hajia Aisha Abubakar, has inaugurated the Reform Leaders National Council on Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises in Abuja. The minister stated that the group was put in place in order to profile solutions to the various challenges confronting SMEs in Nigeria, with a view to putting those problems to rest.
Now you say you have collateral register, but people are still not accessing funds, or not the right kind of people are accessing the funds. What is it we can do? Access to markets, we're talking about the quality of our products, we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about availability and affordability.
Now, the West African Securities Regulatory Authorities has agreed to the convergence of existing rules of capital market regulatory agencies within the region in a bid to ensure that cross-border listing is carried out with little or no hindrances. This is to allow foreign companies carry out their businesses within the region and assist in deepening capital markets within the West African sub-region. Next is a graphic summary of closing figures from the Nigerian stock. The stock market report concludes business news on Good Morning Nigeria. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, Comfort Amodu, there for the business package. Next for us now, we'll take a review of the headlines on the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
Our newspaper reviewer, Bayo Atoyebi, is in the house. Good morning, Bayo, and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Kingsley. Good
morning,
Bayo, Nigeria.
Good to see you. Yes. All right, let's begin with you, Joy. The front pages are varied, yes.
Yes, let's start by taking a look at the Daily Independent newspaper. And the lead story there says, Senate summons service chiefs over killings, arms. And it comes with a rider which says, police arrest gun suppliers to killers in Benue, Taraba. Details of that story can be found on page 4. And down below the picture story there is another lead story which says, Ekiti Guba race, which is the kicker, Eleka emerges PDP flag bearer. There are 4 riders. They're starting with APC holds fresh primary Friday, insist on Al-Makura committee. Tinubu's consensus candidate, meeting ends in deadlock. Why Fayemi was drafted into race, and elected delegate denies participating in Cross River Ward Congress.
All right, let's take a look at the front page of this day newspaper. This day, from top to bottom, they have the story on the Ekiti governorship election. Right above the nameplate of the paper, Ekiti Deputy Governor Olushola emerges PDP gubernatorial candidate. With the rider, APC orders fresh governorship primary for Friday. Tinubu and Akonde move to broker peace, and Fayemi toes party line. Now, below that is a story from the foreign scene. If we can see that on the screen, not the photograph there, just above the nameplate. That's right. It says Iran resumes uranium enrichment as U.S. pulls out of nuclear deal. That story is in greater detail on page 46. The lead story of the paper says Saraki warns IOCs not to induce lawmakers over PIB. IOCs stands for International Oil Companies or Corporations, and PIB is a petroleum industry bill. Economy exposed to oil price volatility, MPC members warn. And banking sector, NPLs, that's non-performing loans, hit 16.21% in February, and concern about over-reliance on CBN's standing lending facility window. And lastly, from the front page of this day, Kano billionaire Sheikh Ishaku Rabiu is dead. That's on page 10. Ayo.
Yes, well, the talk of the nation now is the primaries for the elections for Ekiti State. The PDP concluded its primaries yesterday, and Professor Kolapo Olushola emerged the governorship candidate for the July 14th election. The primaries were held at Ado Ekiti yesterday, and he pulled 1,190 votes to beat Prince Adedayo Adeyeye, who scored 711. There were three contestants initially, but Senator Abiodun Olujimi pulled out. Governor Efeanyi Okowa of Delta was the chairman of the primaries and also the returning officer. In September last year, you recall, specifically September 6th, Governor Ayodele Fauci had already endorsed his deputy to succeed him. However, on the side of the All Progressive Congress, the party National Working Committee has directed that the primaries be held to elect their flag bearer for July 14 elections. The party disqualified the agents who were allegedly said to have disrupted last Saturday's primaries. All the agents are banned from participating in the voting process. However, there are new measures that have been taken. All agents now are to wear tags that will bear the names of the agents they represent. However, their agents too, their aspirants too have been told that they will be vicariously liable for any action by their representative. There were initiatives to broker peace because as at last count, there were 33 candidates contesting for the gubernatorial flag-bearing position, and that was led by the national leader of the APC, Senator Ahmed Bola Tinubu, as well as the former interim chairman of the party, Chief B.C. Akande. Apparently, a consensus candidate has not emerged, but we see what happens on Saturday when they hold the primaries. On the fight against armaments, the police say they have uncovered 2 gun-running ring and arm-dealing gang of 3, and they have made 11 arrests. One is involving a dealer from Anambra with 3 of his gangmen that are based in Takum. From them, they recovered 5 AK-47 rifles. The second group is a 36-year-old man based in Mbajiwa in Benue State, and he's alleged to be the supplier of arms to a man that has already been declared wanted. His name is Tewase Akwaza. He's otherwise known as Ghana. The spokesperson for the police command, ACP Jima Moshood, says that the Inspector of General Intelligence team, as well as the police special forces working together within the Benue-Taraba axis, have so far made these 11 arrests. On the other hand, the military too have made some arrests. Nigeria Army 72 Battalion has paraded 5 persons they describe as militants, for which they were arrested them in Guma in Benue State. Lieutenant Colonel Suleiman says that the troops of 707 Special Forces apprehended these 5 with weapons in their possession. He says one of the suspects died in the process of the arrest. But when they interviewed the suspects, one of the suspects said there had been herders attack in their community, and they woke up early in the morning to pursue them, and in the process they wanted to recover one of their compatriots who was taken away, and it was in the process that they were arrested. They said the arms they were holding, they were keeping them to protect and defend their community. So there you have these conflicting results. Meanwhile, the Senate has invited all the security chiefs, specifically the National Security Advisor, the Chief of Army Staff, the Inspector General of Police, the Controllers General of Custom and Immigration. The concern is about the proliferation of illegal arms in the country and how they get across into the country. Meanwhile, the Inspector General of Police, who had a pending invitation before the Senate, is also expected to appear there today.
Thank you, Barry. Let's take a look at stories trending on the front page of The Punch. The lead story there says, UN condemns Kaduna killings, demands justice for victims, and can get details of the story on page 2 and 11 comes with a rider which says, Senate re-invites IG, summons NSA service chiefs, like you heard Bayo said there. And above the nameplate are a couple of stories too. Buhari seeks foreign support to tackle climate change. Projects World Bank officials to meet Oshibajo, Adeosun, and governors. Details on page 23. Dogara House leaders visit Melaye in hospital. And then for some stories below the picture story we see there, Army parades Benue militia recovers guns. 75-year-old retiree suffers stroke over 15 years unpaid pensions. And two-time election tribunal judges banned from reappointment.
All right, but there's two stories, or 2 or 3 stories we'll take from the front page of the Blueprint newspaper. Very quickly, the lead story says 2019 with the kicker. That's Northern elders demand end to killings and political violence. And Sultan, that's the writer, urges Muslims to vote performing leaders. That story is in greater detail on page 6. And then right at the foot of the front page of the Blueprint itself is the headline, Maize Theft. Trouble looms as Senate inaugurates probe committee. That's on page 5. And then a very interesting story, Bayo. Let's go up a bit again on the front page of Blueprint. That's above the lead story where you have a window of some 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 headlines. Right there. You can see that it says, Nigerian sues Oxford Varsity over wrong dictionary definition. That story is in greater detail on page 15. There's actually a Nigerian lawyer, Bayo, who has sued the Oxford University, which is responsible for publishing the Oxford Dictionary. Yes, Oxford Mini Dictionary. And the bone of contention has to do with the definition provided in the dictionary with regard to mortgagor and mortgagee. You know, the law of mortgages, of course, is a very critical one, you know, when you're dealing with law of property. And the dictionary, of course, transposed the definitions, definition. The meanings for a mortgagor was given to mortgagee, and then the other one was given to that. But of course, the case is in court, and he's suing for just 10 million naira. And indicated it's a very serious one, of course. They will have to make corrections in subsequent editions of the dictionary itself.
In fact, he joined the Oxford Printing Press as a party, and the definition they gave was for mortgagee as the borrower, while the mortgagor as the lender. It took his legal colleague to draw his attention that these meanings have been reversed. And he's claiming that he's demanding that the Oxford pay him that damage and also put a caveat in the dictionary that the meanings they have provided there are not for legal interpretations.
Well, Bayo, thanks a lot. If you're looking for legal definitions, you use Black Law's Dictionary or Black's Law Dictionary. That's the standard dictionary for lawyers. But of course, well, let's see how the case pans out in court and all the issues arising there. From just the caveat, there could be mistakes in otherwise what would be the Bible or the gospel, according to some publications. The editorial we're taking this morning is also from Blueprint newspaper, and that's on page 11. And it's a subject, of course, that coincides with what we are discussing this morning. The ban on codeine syrups. That's the editorial of the paper. And it says, in part, that the federal government, of course, is to be commended for the ban that it has placed on codeine-based cough syrups. But it's also advising the federal government not to neglect its commitment towards implementing the National Drug Distribution Guidelines bill to commence in 2019, and that this will, to a large extent, give impetus to the ban on opioid-based cough syrups, as well as improve the abilities of regulators to audit the trail of drugs.
Yes. Before I go to the editorial, can I quickly correct the impression created by one of the headlines that you read, that Iran has commenced nuclear? It's not true. What happened was that United States pulled out of the joint agreement, and France, United Kingdom, and Germany have expressed serious reservations about the action of the United States, because the United Nations agency that is responsible for monitoring the nuclear activities of Iran said Iran has not defaulted and they have been in compliance. So it has thrown that nuclear agreement into serious jeopardy. But I think they are trying to manage the crisis. Now,
Yeah,
talking about the
that
editorial.
story is actually from this day newspaper.
Yes.
I read the headline, and the story is in greater detail on page 46. I think it's an agency report because there's no byline to the story here. Let me just take the first paragraph, perhaps, so that we can sort that out in the days ahead. Iran has swiftly announced its reaction to the dumping of the 2015 nuclear deal by unilateralist United States President Donald Trump, saying it could resume uranium enrichment without limit. Could.
It could.
All right. Bayo, the editorial I talked about, the ban on codeine syrup.
Yes, the ban on codeine syrup came last week, and it was predicated on Sweet Codeine, a documentary produced by the BBC, which shocked everybody the extent to which codeine was devastating the country. And the minister gave a specific directive to NAFDAC and the Pharmaceutical Agency of Nigeria. And the directive is that those that are already in circulation are to be followed up and withdrawn. However, the editorial is emphasizing that the areas to look at by the Ministry of Health is to address young Nigerians who are addicted to the drugs and see how they can help them, particularly in the area of rehabilitation. Another area is over-the-counter drugs, where drugs that are not supposed to be provided except on prescription are freely given out to people on request. So they anticipate that if these areas loopholes are plugged, there will be a lot of success attained in eliminating the codeine effects.
All right, Joy. Let's want to thank Bayo. Let's double thanks from both of us.
Thank you.
See you tomorrow, Thursday. All right. Good morning, Nigeria. We'll take a short break now. When we return, of course, we're returning to the subject matter of drug abuse and addiction.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There's no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Madam. Brought us as usual.
As usual. You have no problem.
For the three put
You are welcome, sir.
As usual, yeah?
You take that one. You take that one. You don't understand? We want Nigerian homegrown rice. Finish. You don't have. You don't have.
Join the rice revolution today.
No other rice that tastes like Nigerian rice. Are you sorry? That's the Nigerian rice we are talking about. Chocolate made in Nigerian rice. Healthy food. I'm going to bring Mrs. to come to chocolate rice made in Nigeria here. And see how it are made.
Correct.
And how they are cook it.
Correct.
Homegrown rice are good for your health. It boosts our economy and give employment to our people.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Can I see your particulars, sir?
Officer, my particulars no dey here.
In that case, you'll have to come with me to the police station.
Officer, which levels? Where I for find you something make you take arrange your weekend.
What? Offense number 1, driving without particulars. Offense number 2, trying to bribe an officer of the law.
I won't harass Nigerians or take bribe. Change begins with me.
This message is brought to you by the National Orientation Agency in conjunction with the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
To the outer framers, the fringe growers, you don't need to hide anymore. Try Dettol Even Tone. It cleans and helps to reduce the appearance of blemishes, giving your skin a healthy feel. Dettol, be 100% sure.
Dettol soap is now also available for 100 Naira only.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the daring and invincible Louis the Mosquito. Responsible for 200 malaria cases all on its own. Is there anything that can kill Louis? Morphine! Presenting Mortise Power Guard. Its powerful formula kills malaria mosquitoes fast. So, get Mortise Power Guard. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the daring and invincible Louis the Mosquito. Responsible for 200 malaria cases all on its own. Is there anything that can kill Louis? Morphine! Presenting Mortise Power Guard. Its powerful formula kills malaria mosquitoes fast. So, get Mortise Power Guard.
All right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria, and we are reaching you as always live on the network service of Africa's largest television network. Now, the menace of drug abuse and addiction is a running battle that has continued to worry government, families, and society at large. And this is because of the devastating effect it has on its victims, most of whom are young persons.
That's exactly why the Nigerian Television Authority has done a lot in raising awareness on the subject matter, with an array of guests appearing on Good Morning Nigeria, as well as other platforms of the Nigerian Television Authority. This is in addition to other news reports every now and then.
Now, on today's edition of the program, we shall recall a few of the previous episodes that Good Morning Nigeria had on drug abuse and addiction. And that's before we'll bring in our guests to discuss the subject matter in greater detail.
There are several reasons why people go into drugs, into either abusing prescriptive medications or psychoactive substances. The reasons are far-reaching. It could start from peer pressure. Usually, the age at which an individual had an encounter with substance use is between their teenage age, though we started seeing a reduced index case of people initiating substance use. So you could say peer pressure, because at that particular age, you notice that children, again, they are less in touch with their parents and more in touch with their peers. So it's a peer culture experimentation that goes on around that period. And by the time they get hooked to the substance, because it's psychoactive in nature, it affects the way the mind works. So by the time they get hooked to the substance, it becomes very difficult to stay off. And the reasons for continual usage would now change from experimentation or peer pressure to something like coping with distress, coping with life situation, coping with frustration, coping with failures or academic difficulties, could be, or coping with even job-related issues. So there are several reasons why people go into psychoactive substance use and prescriptive medication. Some also use prescriptive medication, probably on account of surgery. They were given some pain relievers, and after the surgery and after the issue had been done and treated, they continue using such medication because they somehow get addicted to it and find it difficult to discontinue.
Let's get to Lagos, where we introduce Glenn Pritchard. Now, how grave is the situation on our hands in Nigeria?
There's a lot of anecdotal evidence that the rise of drug use is happening within Nigeria. However, it's only anecdotal evidence. The project that I work for, the European Union funded project, has undertaken a national survey in relation to drug use, the first national drug use survey of its kind in Nigeria, and the results of that will be out early next year. This will be groundbreaking in terms, it'll provide us the evidence and really understand what the true situation in relation to drug use is. Yes, there's a lot of evidence that The move is towards opioid medicines, over-the-counter medicines, such as tramadol, codeine. There's definitely a lot of information in relation to that, but we hope this survey will be able to, once and for all, give us a baseline on data and really understand what is the prevalence of drug use within Nigeria.
Let's go to Benin, where we have Dr. James Bayo, a neuropsychiatrist. Sir, you've listened in to submissions of Mr. Richard and, of course, our guest and the studio, Mr. Jonado, still focusing on the preponderance of people engaging in drug abuse and, of course, the prescribed drugs too that are now usually abused. Now, what is your take on the psychology of people engaging in it? And being a psychiatrist, what has been your experience, handling such cases in the hospital?
Thank you, Kieran. There are two factors, basically. One factor is at the individual level, and then the other factor is at societal level. And one sees that there are certain predispositions for a certain individual to use drugs, and the clinical psychologist has enumerated some of them. But two factors are responsible for the dynamics for how drugs are used, and one is availability, the second is cost. So there is a desire for people to use drugs, either because they just want to experiment, or it is something recreational for them initially, or probably because peer pressure, or it's available, like I said earlier. And one sees that because young persons begin to see that certain prescription medications are easily obtainable, one sees a preference for these substances, and because they can also afford it compared to other medications that one sees like cocaine or heroin. And it is this that sadly authorities have not been proactive regarding. In terms of prescription, I know that 2 or 3 years ago, the then Honorable Minister said that codeine-containing cough syrups will no longer be available as prescription medicines. But yes, in the city centers, we can see that it will no longer be available. But in many other pharmacies and chemists, one is still able to easily get codeine to use.
Mrs. Rolly Bode George, Director General of National Drugs Law Enforcement Agency, NDLEA. I'd like to take you on the enormity of drug abuse in Nigeria. You should have a more authentic data of what is happening across the 6 geopolitical zones of the country with respect to drug abuse. Now, let Nigerians know the enormity of this from your own point of view.
We've had a household survey on drug use in Nigeria. The data, I won't want to give you data that's not correct, but the analysis is actually the gene analysis, and this was a project done in partnership with the EU, with the project coordinators being the UNODC. But the truth of the matter is that we do know that the drug problem, but one of the things that we have found out from the survey so far, from the raw data, is that we've identified a lot of vulnerable groups. We found out the youths in schools, those in the IDP camps, sex workers. Unfortunately, we've added women to our lists, But I'm sure that in another few months we'll have the authentic data in terms of the real data. But I mean, it's just easy to know. But those with the, you know that also now with the UNODC has upgraded 9 medical facilities, and they've been collecting data, which is under the NENDU project. And from the data that we've received, it's still raw. We realize that even we have a lot about youths, and we also in NDLEA, the drug counseling section, we realized a lot of the ones that we have are mostly the youths that are in universities. Unfortunately, the university situation, they thought that more private universities actually than the government ones, that it's not properly monitored, and I think that maybe it's the monitoring system. While I was on this program before, I had said that it was necessary for the government to take a step, not in a punitive manner, but in a step to find out that we keep our children drug-free. And one of the things that I am advocating for is insisting on drug testing in the university settings, because at least when they know that they're going to be tested every 3 or 5 months, it kind of gives you some incentive to keep a little bit clean. unfortunately now, and most of the things that we find, it's a lot of dysfunctional families. When you ask people, why in counseling, what has caused this? They say, well, it's the dysfunctional family that I'm in. But for the women now, unfortunately, with the cultural situation in Nigeria, a lot of the women, mostly up north, we found that have been using drugs. But it's because of the cultural situation, they can't come out, and so they can't access treatment as easily as they would. But in terms of the data, as you said, it's something that will come out authentically. But from the ones that we have from us, from our situation, it's mostly the youths, those in the IDP camps, sex workers, because the survey shows that sex workers and youths in schools and youth generally.
Now let's return to Dr. James Bao. Now, in your concluding submission, which way forward?
The way forward is two-pronged, I would say. One, let's put our money where our mouth is. I think that the current policies or strategies that are available are sufficient to put a dent to the magnitude of the problem of drugs in this country. What we lack is implementation. And implementation is not just that facilities be built. It requires that staff be trained. It requires that funding is available and funding is continuous and increasing. Also, that the evidence through research of any intervention that is done to know whether what we are doing is working. Secondly is prevention. Interestingly, preventive processes are not as expensive as curative. You look at drug treatment facilities, it requires a lot of staffing and everything. But preventive services are very cheap. I go back again to Kaduna, and I was reading recently of their efforts at reviving, because I know the NDLEA was at the forefront of drug-free clubs in the country, and reviving and expanding drug-free clubs in secondary schools. Once a child receives the right education, and with that education is able to tell his peers that using tramadol or using Refnol or spiking his Coca-Cola with codeine is not necessary for him to be able to talk in class or to speak with the opposite sex. Once he has information, we have saved this country a lot of loss from training a child and from the problem that the parents and other relatives will suffer if that child eventually gets hooked on drugs.
From that highlight from one of our editions in 2017, we bring you back to our studio in Abuja, where we're being joined by the Chairman and Chief Executive of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, retired Colonel Muhammad Mustafa Abdallah. Good morning and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you for having me.
Also joining us from the United Kingdom via Skype is the psychiatrist, Dr. Vincent Udeze. Dr. Udeze, it's good to have you join us this morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
All right, there are two other guests who are with us here in the studios. We have a father and a son. First, we'd like to welcome Alhaji Mohammed Abdullah Saidu. Alhaji Saidu, pleasure to have you on the program. Okay. And then also here with us in the studios, as I said, is a son. That's Mr. Safiyanu Saddam Saidu, who is a student at the Federal University of Lokoja in Kogi State. Mr. Saidu, pleasure to have you on the program.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The reason why we have Saidu in the studios, the two Saidus, is that the gentleman whom we just introduced, who was a student, kicked the habit of drug addiction and is now a campaigner against the problem. But let's begin with the chairman of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, that's retired Colonel Mohammed Mustafa Abdallah. You listened to the excerpts from one of the editions of Good Morning Nigeria focusing on the drug problem in the country. And of course, we have several other episodes. We've had several other episodes on the problem. But what is the status of the fight against drug abuse and addiction in the country today?
Thank you very much. I have also been in your studio on a different program to speak about the same drug menace that bedevils our country. what the clinical psychologists and the psychiatrists say are very much right on point. The things that they have said from last year, if anything, have only accentuated. The NDLA is doing as best as it can with the tools that it has, and that's how it's been.
Is the NDLA overwhelmed?
Put it this way. Take a look at the Enabling Act that sets up the agency, and then match that with the staffing, and then side by side, look at the tasks the NDLA has to perform. From when it was set up some 27 years ago, it had never operated beyond the strength of 5,000 personnel for Nigeria. All of you seated here will agree with me. I can put 10,000 people in the city of Lagos alone. That will not be enough. But I have less than 5,000 now for the whole of Nigeria. So let's start from the manpower. Look at how little it is compared to the task. And then link it up with the fact that recruitments have not been made. So you essentially have the same people who naturally, necessarily are aging. So there are some tasks that you need to inject new blood. We haven't been able to do that, in spite of the fact that Mr. President gave us permission to recruit. First of all, when I asked him that we needed to update our manpower, he agreed me immediately. I was thinking 5,000. He said, no, I'll give you 5,000 for 2016 and then 10,000 for 2017. Here we are. Nothing has been done yet. And what Mr. President intended then was that 20,000 figure was a stabilization figure for us to see what more could be done. But that has not been done yet.
Now, if there's that kind of political will from the president, where is the challenge coming from?
I will expect that you are the press people. You should find out. The president has approved. I have complete consonance with the members of the National Assembly because they are on the same page with me. They are worried about it. So you find out.
So beyond the issue of employment, some people have argued that it seems as if you spend more time on the issue of trafficking than focusing on the consumption of drugs, which has now become a huge problem in the country.
Sorry, what are you trying to differentiate here? Trafficking and consumption.
Yes.
If we stop trafficking, where will the consumption come from?
In terms of, no, I was making reference to the fact that, like, if you watch most stories over the years coming from your agency, we hear more about the issue of trafficking. We just started hearing about the issue of consumption, but we haven't heard so much from your agency about fighting this challenge of consumption.
Okay. You heard what I said about recruitment.
Yes.
Do you think, in all honesty, the strength of 5,000 people would be enough to do rehabilitation? We do have our rehabilitation units all over. We do have our trained personnel. But like the clip also said, it is better to prevent than to treat. Because we haven't been able to do the cheapest one, which is interdiction. Rehabilitation is, at least, by my estimation and experience, 10 times worse and more expensive.
All right. Chairman of NDLA, what we have also observed is an escalation in the range of drugs and substances being abused in different parts of the country. And as my colleague is indicating, we're talking about arresting trafficking. Of course, most of the headliners concern persons who are picked up with some grams or kilograms of cocaine and heroin at the airport. And then on the local scene, what you hear more are raids on farms where Indian hemp, that's cannabis, is being cultivated. But there seem to have been, beneath your radar, codeine, meth, tramadol, and several others. Until the explosion of the issue of codeine, there seemed to have been inadequate or insufficient attention being paid to these other substances. Are you acting alone or acting, for instance, in consonance with the Ministry of Health and related agencies?
the NDLA acts in consonance. Let me clarify some points. It is not true, or it's not correct, let me just say it's not true. It's not correct that NDLA has done nothing about the cough syrups and codeine. In June last year, the UN week that was celebrated, I discussed with the Minister of Health. It is on record. You have it. And I told him that there was a need to replace some of these drugs to be off the counter. I'm surprised that it was already on before that. They said, yes, please go ahead and give me a list. Okay, this cough syrup, the tramadol, and 27 others I have given to the ministry already. And the minister said, if there are anyone, as soon as you see, you just let me know. Let me tell you something about it. It's not only cough syrup. From December till now, 167 million pills of tramadol alone, dosage 200 milligrams, between 200 and 400 milligrams, have been seized alone at Apapa Post. That is only by one of my teams. I can give you the record all over the country. It's something like 96 tons of tramadol only between December and now. It is not true that we only busy ourselves with the cannabis cultivation and farm. But it is also true that cannabis is the most prevalent and cheapest drug of abuse among the youth. It's a starter drug. Most people will start from that before they graduate. So, all of the exhibits that we have destroyed, you will see there are tramadol, there are other drugs. By the way, let's make a distinction here. Until this current ban, codeine and the syrup were illicit drugs. Illicit, which means it wasn't in the purview of NDLA. I am concerned with illicit drugs. But from when this law was passed, 3 days ago, I seized 107 kilograms of codeine with cough syrup. So it has not become illicit. But before then, it was not our purview.
But it was being abused. All right, NDLA Chairman, thank you very much. We'll bring you in later on in the conversation. Let's bring in two guests that we have with us in the Abuja studios, father and son. Mr. Saddam Seidu, this is a student at Federal University, Lokoja in Kogi State. Tell us something. What happened to you?
Okay. I grew up in the north, Kano to be precise. And as a kid, I looked up to some older kids whom I felt were big boys. And I wanted to be like them when I was their age. So I felt like smoking and doing drugs was a major criteria for being a big boy. So as soon as I got closer to the age, I started it. And I felt like, okay, it was cool at the beginning because I was with Dr. Vincent Udenze, in a car with a psychologist, and we're driving. And the psychologist was like, why will someone want to get high? She doesn't understand, like, why will somebody just wake up and he wants to get high? And Dr. V was like, okay, answer her, Saddam. And I was like, okay, you go out with some friends, maybe in the university setting, you don't have freedom at home and there's a house party, you're in school, there's no mommy and daddy, and you meet with some certain set of people and they're smoking and you want to feel among and not just show that, okay, you're mommy's boy or daddy's boy, and you smoke, maybe marijuana for the first time, and you come back and you're feeling all cool. And I told her that, okay, at this point, you're feeling, okay, there's this girl I've been trying to ask out, I'm feeling good and all that, and she happens to be online on WhatsApp. And you guys start talking and you're enjoying how you are at that moment. And I told her that you feel like, okay, you're William Shakespeare at this point. You get? And you do it again and she's just like, okay, 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 and you guys are flowing. after everything, maybe the next day, you don't feel like that anymore. And you want to feel cool. You meet those set of people again, and it continues. And with time, it's not just how you feel. You don't feel cool anymore. You can't eat without it. You can't sleep without it, and you're hooked on it.
Right, that's interesting. That takes me to another issue, which is that of peer pressure in most of our institutions of learning. I want you to speak a bit on that. How is it, what does that do to students on campus, this issue of peer pressure, wanting to belong and feel among?
I would use myself as an example. Like, I wanted to be the coolest kid in school. And peer groups and all that, you mix with a lot of wrong set of people. And I'm supposed to have graduated in 2014. Here I am in the same process in another institution. I'm in 200 level now. I see a lot of just yesterday I wanted to withdraw transport to come here, and I just ran into one of my friends. He's a banker at FCMB, and I'm in 200 level. But I'm not saying I regret, because it's my past that's it's how do I put it, like it's killing. Out of every 10 youths you meet in the streets or in the universities now, out of every 10, 8 are users. And all these people, they didn't start at home. They met with the wrong set of people in school, and it's bringing our youths down. Yet they say we're the leaders of tomorrow, but we're dying in today.
All right, thank you very much, Safiano. We'll come back to you. Let's bring in your dad, who is also here with us in the studios, Alhaji Muhammad Abdullahi Saidu. What did you observe in him?
Well, initially, I saw the boys in the society who were in Kano, who I didn't consider them responsible, and I was associating with them, and they were sending him, so I detached him from them. And nobody should send him on any errand at all, because for us, those boys are not good boys. So, and I didn't want my child to be associated with them. But at that time, I was too young for me to begin to suspect, you know, because when we were growing up, an elder would call some of those who smoke the cigarette. They asked to go and buy for them, want to take cola. No, they sent to go and buy for them. We knew that was... and
that when you are coming back, you should light it. You should light the cigarette.
No, they never told us to light them. So by now I told them that because the elders at that time, they are responsible. They don't do anything. They just sit down and smoke their cigarette, and that's all we know about them. So when they are sending, and these ones are not looking clean, they are looking irresponsible, looking haggard. I said that these ones, they have gone beyond the normal limit. So I detached him from them, and that was all. And until much later, then I begin to see that he is withdrawn. He does, when you are staying in the sitting room, he's not there. He's always alone. He wants to do this, and then he will go out. He does not come back on time, and then begin to notice all those things. Then when the thing got blown up was when he was in secondary school. He didn't finish. He finished his secondary school, but he passed his work and the jump. I told him because of this thing he was doing, he didn't pay attention to the Quranic education. And I told him that if you don't do that, even if you have 300, I will not send you to the university. I will not go, because if you miss this level, the way I was observing him, then you get to the university, he will not do the Quranic education again. So after school, I sent him to Mina. My cousin is married there, and the husband is a sheikh. And it was there that they now saw the boys in their society who were known to be bad boys, who were coming to look for him. And then they started saying that, yes, he confessed that he was associated with them because of what they were taking. That was drugs. So, and then after that, I went to Mina to meet them. They said I should come. My sister called me, said I should come. And then I went. Said I should come tomorrow, come, whatever I do come. And I went to meet her, and they told me. When we asked him, he was trying to deny. Eventually, he brought some packs of marijuana from the pack. I said, okay. That's okay. So what do? We have to think of how to get him back, because it's a long time. At that point, he would not tell you the truth. All he's saying now, he wouldn't have said them at that time. You know, so he continued his Quranic. Within 3 months, amazingly, he finished the Quran and very fluent in it. So he came back. After I came back, and I started looking for admission for him. I went to Zaria 3 times to get admission for him. Then, you know, because this thing has come to the glare of the family, he still is not. You didn't expect that he would stop automatically, you know, because it's a habit that has been built over time. And then he continued that way. We took him to Zaria, and then I put spies to look at him in Zaria. He didn't know, and he was not attending classes. I got that report, and when he came back, he didn't even register. So I got him back, and then he will leave home. He won't come. 2 days, 3 days, he will not come. We'll look for him. And sometimes I told him, not to look for him. Don't need to stress yourself and get into a problem. Eventually, he told me that he would want a rehabilitation. That is a place they do rehabilitation, so that he doesn't want to get, because at the time he will not know why he was even involved in this thing. He feels sorry for himself at sometimes, and at other time he will disappear. So, and then we took him to sign-ups.
Looking back now and listening to the story you just told us, would you say it was a good idea to have sent him away from you when you discovered some of these traits at the beginning?
Yes, one, it was not sending him away. I sent him to school, that is Quranic education, so that he could do. But because he was outside the family and then they observed what he was doing, that also had helped, because they saw some abnormal behavior and association. But because they now called me, say, is it how he has been? That has helped, because if he was around, he would still cover up, and it would have taken us a longer time to know. So sometimes it's good that, and if you take to responsible families, if you just took him to somewhere else other than that, the thing would have been called. They may say, don't say because we don't know, and then that's why we are not our neighbor's keepers nowadays. In most cases, that's why. It's a good thing that he had gone to, you know.
Alhaji Saidu, thank you very much. Let's bring in this time Dr. Vincent Mdenze, who was involved in the rehabilitation of Mr. Safiyanu Saidu. Dr. Mdenze, tell us the story.
Hello?
I said, I introduced you by indicating that you were involved in the rehabilitation of Mr. Safiyanu Saidu. That's the student now at the Federal University in Lokoja. Tell us the story of his rehab.
Well, thank you for that. With his consent, I'm able to share, some of his information. This is a boy who started using drugs as far back as when he was about 13 years old, and always kept the information away from his family. At the time, he became dependent on drugs and was struggling in education. His family ended up bringing him to our facility sign-ups for treatment. He engaged in treatment initially. He felt he was doing quite well. When he was discharged, he went back into the community believing that all was fine. He did not really so much pay attention to aftercare. He went back and started mingling with the same group of friends. And surprise, surprise, he eventually relapsed again. That shocked him. He came back to us. He spoke to me. At this point in time, he was a bit concerned that family had spent money in rehab and he has relapsed. And I made him to understand that, look, it's not just going for rehab. The aftercare is important. Social support is important. Family support is important. What's your biggest issue? He then talked about some of his dreams. He talked about the fact that he wanted to do music. And music was going to be something that he would use to express himself. And I said to him that, a lot of families sometimes struggle with understanding if music in itself, the interest in music is because of drugs, or is it just that you actually like music? And we have to differentiate the two. So I said, okay, look, you know what? We'll bring you into the facility. We don't involve your parents in payment, so we'll treat it for free. And let's detox you and clean you up again. So we did that. And he maintained his interest in music. And I said, okay, fine. It means that we might have to have a conversation with family to make them understand that your interest in music is a real interest. That's one. However, that there is still an expectation that you graduate. There's an expectation that you go back to school and you have to do what you're expected to do. So Saddam had that short period in treatment, got better, went back to uni, to university. Then guess what? He relapsed a third time. Came back to us and was like, Dr. V, why am I relapsing? Why is this happening to me? But in reflection, at this point, Saddam started to shift in his mindset. He started to feel that he has lost so much in life. He's disappointed his family. He's disappointed his friends. He's disappointed himself. And he felt he really didn't have a future. And I said to him that, look, Saddam, sometimes our past will define our future in a positive way. That just maybe if you decide to get it right, if you decide to reorient yourself, focus on your aftercare, make yourself, almost like an ambassador, that maybe this difficult time you've had all these years may end up becoming a good thing for you. And Saddam took that on board, buckled down, went back to school. And I said to him, go back to your family and tell your parents the truth, that we have to start from there, own up to everything. He did that. He told me his mother cried. He told me, it was the day he called me and he said, do you know what? Say, after sharing with my father, that he thought his father will kick him away, his father would almost disown him, that rather his father drew him closer to him, and that his father started having man-to-son conversations that he had never had. So Saddam could not believe that, how can he tell his father that he's done all these things, and then his father draws him closer? That he couldn't believe that was possible. And to me, that was the beginning of the journey. So I'm emphasizing the fact that it's not just medical treatment, but the support he got from his family at some point became very significant in Saddam's coming around. And now he's become an ambassador. He's done a song for the Northern Governors Wife Forum. They have also, taken some part in payment of his fees as a form of scholarship. So, Saddam is really, really keen to be an ambassador. And, I'm very proud to be associated and being a part of this young man's treatment because, I think he's a testimony.
Dr. Odenze, still staying with you, now that we're talking about the issue of rehabilitation and the attitude of society towards patients. In our society in Africa, most people look at this idea of shaming and the fact that this story shouldn't come from my house. What should parents and relatives do to help those who are trying to get over drug abuse and addiction, especially in Nigeria?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. Look, first of all, the issue of shame is because a good number of times people think it's really not happening to other people. This is going to affect my family name. And most times the families are the last to know. On your street, your neighbors know your son is on drugs. In the university, people know your son is on drugs. Your relations know your son is on drugs. You're just the last person to know. So hiding things, who are you hiding it from? That is one. So if people understand treatment, I had a family who came in and he brought his 14-year-old son, left him in the facility and said to me, do everything to him, treat him, punish him, everything. I'm not getting involved. And I said to the father, you might have to as well take your son with you because you are part of treatment. And it's important we see, I always say that, look, when it comes to addiction, let's start by saying that the family is ill. The family is unwell. That illness is manifesting in this child, maybe sometimes using drugs. So we need to look at the whole family dynamics. That way, I get families involved in treatment. Families should not be ashamed. They are part of the treatment for these young ones. I must draw your attention to something else that happens in families. It's not just the boy or girl who is on drugs that's affected. It affects others, and I'll tell you how. Sometimes, if you think of a family of 4 children, one of them might be abusing substances. That's the one that's dependent on drugs. Another child, all of a sudden, may be what you call the hero. So he's the one that all of a sudden starts to excel in university, starts to do very well, having very good grades. The family extol that particular son, and he is the hero. Another one becomes the mascot. That's the clown. So he realizes that the family is in pain, and he starts to act out in a funny way. He's the one that cracks all the jokes in the family to make daddy happy, make mommy smile. He adopts that role. Then you have the one who's lost. That's the one that goes to visit. He just can't stand what's happening in the family. So guess what? He prefers to go spend time with relations. He's never at home. He's always with relatives. So what I'm trying to, then you have the enabler. The enabler sometimes can be a parent. So you can imagine when, for example, dad is very strict on the fact that this young man is doing drugs, this is unacceptable, this is wrong, we've got to deal with him. But then maybe the mother, I'm not saying it's always mothers, but I'm just saying maybe the mother is the one that says, oh, you're suspended for 2 weeks, we will not tell dad because dad will be very hard on you. So by thinking you're supporting the young man, you're actually enabling him. So I need to flag up the fact that when we think family support and shame, families have to realize that it's not just the addicted person that's affected. So we all have to come together, look at all the other family members, identify that this is just an illness like any other illness that's manageable, requires family support, requires love and care, and everyone should come on board.
All right, Dr. Vincent Udeze, thank you very much. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. But let's bring in again Mr. Saddam Seidu. One of the issues that we touched on in a previous edition of Good Morning Nigeria had to do with demand reduction, before we got into rehabilitation and all of that. Now, what would be your advice in terms of having to block the supply route of some of these drugs? And I'm asking this question, tell us, if you moved into a new city, or if you moved into a new environment, how will you know who the supplier is? How will you know where you can get, the particular doses? And therefore, what can be done, to get hold of those suppliers and put them out of business?
Okay. For me, while I was using, for example, when I went to Mina for the Quranic education, I needed to smoke that morning. I got out and I was by the roadside and I was observing the Okada people. So I got to see someone whose lips was black and his eyes were showing that he also is a user. And I stopped in and I told him that, okay, if you could take me to where I could get cannabis, I'm going to give you 1,000. And the distance was just a 50 naira distance. And because I was willing to pay him 1,000, he took me to 5 other places. If you don't get here, you get here. If you don't get here, you get there. So first things first, in getting youths not to do drugs, the number one key, I feel the number one key to life is understanding. Once they have that understanding that you can do music without getting high, if you're a writer, you can source for inspiration without getting high, then the world will be a better place. Because currently, as at today, I'm 560 days clean. And I give thanks to my family, Synapse and Reconnect for making me a better person. And I'm also a writer. I'm working on my book titled Journey So Far. And this 560 days have been the best part of my life. I'm writing very well. And I don't need the highest, maybe I'm bored, I take a Fanta, and my writing continues. So the first thing we need to tell youths like me, it's give them that understanding that they can do and be whoever they want to be without getting high.
Well, congratulations, Mr. Seidu, on the fact that 560 days, you're squeaky clean. But again, for those, who are already in it and who would like to get out, can you give us an indication of the kind of struggle and triumph you have had over your thought processes? Something is pushing you to sort of go and get this, and then you are willing yourself and say, no, listen, I mustn't do this, I must reject it. When you feel like getting it in the past without control, without hindrance, you got it. But at some point, you now start saying, no, I shouldn't do this. Tell us that struggle and how it can be of use, to young persons who are out there at the moment.
Basically, my relapse then was I was struggling. I was struggling with inspiration. I was struggling with music. And I still had that belief upstairs that if I don't use, there's no way this song will be better. And that brought in relapse. And so talking about for those who are still using, who feel, because at some point you get to that point where you're tired, it's not making sense, but you're still taking. At some point I will smoke and smoke and smoke, but I don't feel that high. I'm not happy I'm doing it, but I'm just doing it. What it used to give me then, I don't feel, I need to consume more to get to that stage, and that stage, I might get to that stage and it's a pass out. Whatever happens stayed in that day. I might wake up and not remember what happened. So basically, if youths will be more truthful to themselves. I remember meeting my dad in the room one morning and I'm like, I can't do this no more. I can't promise you that you leave me at home and go to work and I will not go out to use. I will not go out to look for. So if youths will be more truthful and talk to their parents or whoever is their sponsor or guardian and be truthful that I have a problem. Because it's one thing to admitting you have a problem. A problem shared is a problem solved. So if youths at home, believe me, I did drugs. I did a lot of things. I did.
All right, still staying with you, Seidu, quickly. You, as a campaigner, you speak the language of your colleagues. What are the strategies that you're employing to reach out to them apart from your book?
Yeah, I have a couple of songs about saying no to drugs. Politics might divide people, but music and entertainment bring people together. A Hausa man who is in love with Two-Face music would not want to know that he's from Benue or whatever. Music brings people together. So I'm working on, I have a song titled Drug Free Iowa and Say No to Drugs. And I have Dr. Vincent's children on that track too. So I'm looking out to making a video, and since the chairman of NDLEA is here, I'm making a proposal to him that if we could do a video on one of my songs so that we could reach out to people, At some point, I've been there, I've done it. I could relate better and tell you how it feels and still tell you it doesn't pay. Because if it paid, or if it's paying, I will have graduated by now. I graduated in 2010 from secondary school, and here I am still in 200 level. That's to show that it doesn't pay. So if we could, come together, do a campaign song, touch lives, and I feel we would go a long way.
All right, thank you very much. Let's bring in again the chairman of the NDLEA, Colonel Abdullah. What are your takeaways from what you've heard so far?
It's very typical of how addiction starts, I must say. But after saying that, I'd like to say two courageous persons I have here in this studio. The young man, Saddam, for realizing the path that he has taken was only leading him to destruction. But more importantly, his father, who never gave up. This is where parenthood starts. Actually, the father noticed something from Kano. That's why he tried to detach him from that by sending him to Mina. The Quranic education was only a bonus. He started noticing something, and he thought what every good father should do. Try to detach your children from what you know will be a harm to them. I like to say that we have abandoned parenthood. Many of us now think parenthood is something a temporary, but I say parenthood is a full-time job. You do not have children if you cannot give them the attention that they deserve. They are your business until they become adults themselves. But you agree with me, whatever we say or do outside in the streets by the government comes to naught if families do not do their part. By then, step out a little bit. Our religious bodies, the imams, the pastors, like we all did before when we were kids. I like to say something about this peer pressure. These peers are not always bad. After all, when we were in school, then during my time, you look at the best students, they were your role models. You had their pictures, their everything on your locker. You are looking out to be for them. How come all of a sudden all our children do is look for somebody who is bad to copy? I'm not saying that we're all good that time, but the bad ones had no following.
Don't you think that has to do with the values in our society today?
Of course, it has to do with our values. We have lost our values. But then that is not the task for NDLA. The society as a whole must go back to its values.
All right, let's take our viewers' reactions that have come in by way of tweets using the Twitter handle on our screen. Joy, let's begin with the tweets. Victor Hioswama has this tweet. Now, the menace of drug abuse, especially amongst our young persons, is alarming. Now, the most abused drugs are tramadol and codeine. Government regulatory agencies should ensure stricter control of manufacture of drugs and retail outlets for these drugs without prescription.
Now, Iman Nulu Negbe tweets, the abuse of drugs is going beyond the cough syrup to the use and abuse of adhesives and even the so-called alabukun. NAFDAC needs to step up person-to-person monitor and not just issue NAFDAC numbers to companies producing all kinds of drugs.
Festus Akimboyewa tweets, government at all levels must intervene fast in educating Nigerians about the many dangers of drug abuse and addiction. It's vital we start telling Nigerians, especially the young ones, about the effects of drug abuse.
Sani Michael Omakoju tweets, drug abuse is now like a way of life among youth in Nigeria due to rising cases of failed homes and frustrating economy. While charging families to instill moral values in their words, government should also create job opportunities for the teeming young people to engage them.
Mike Ayakwa tweets, now adequate disciplinary action should be meted to both the drug addicts and those who courier the commodities. Our judiciary should come hard on drug culprits.
Law Alpha C tweets, drug abuse, let's take this one from Apple Echo. Part of the way forward is to stop giving out licenses to quack pharmacies.
And that is reinforced by Dele Jack Solomon that government must look into drugstores like chemists and pharmacies, as well as women selling local drugs in parks and garages.
All right, let's take this one from Cecilia Okoroma. Thank you, Saddam, for realizing that you derailed. Thanks for your helpers, your dad, Dr. Denze, NTA, Good Morning Nigeria, respectively, for this.
All right, Rabiu Suleiman, the sale of drugs and other medicines by unregulated vendors escalated the menace of drug abuse in our society.
Festus Akimboyewa tweets, there should be support and advice for the whole family of those abusing drugs because there's a lot of parental guilt which hinders parents from supporting their children who are hooked on drugs.
And Jacobs Fago tweets, these drugs are easily bought from pharmacies without proper prescription. Let there be serious sanctions for the stores selling hard drugs or selling drugs without proper prescription from a qualified doctor.
And this one is from Abdullahi Shonisabi. I think parents can't be totally exonerated from this unfortunate trend. Most of them totally abandon their roles.
And Ibrahim Aliu has this tweet to which the NDLA chairman will reply. Mr. Chairman, the existing staff lack motivation, officers are not being promoted, and there is no clear direction from the management of the agency. These are internal issues to the NDLA. That's one leg that we would like you to respond to. The other leg, and very briefly too, is it necessarily the case that, assuming we didn't have the NDLA, that states and local governments will have no role whatsoever in dealing with drug abuse and addiction in the country? And therefore, what should we expect of local governments and state governments as additional support to what the NDLA is doing?
That's a very good question. Let me answer it briefly two ways. The first thing I need to say is the regulation, the law setting up the NDLA is a federal law. But indeed, we all know that the citizens are local citizens. They belong to local governments, they belong to states. It is for that reason that a few states are examples of the interest that they have of their citizens. I'd like to mention here Anambra, Oyo, Kano. And Kano as a whole, it is the first unit that might overcome the drug menace because everybody's in sync. You have the government, you have the businessmen, you have the elites, you have the academicians, you have the civil society groups, you have the youth organizations, all working together. They have realized how bad it is. If ever we are going to have a success story, it will come from Kano. As bad as it is with Kano, they seem to have realized that they must all work together. So Kano is showing the way forward. Recall the statement the Emir of Kano made. I think most Nigerians will agree with him. You don't step up to look for a public office if you're not clean from drugs. I do agree with him. I do agree that every person, there should be something to look forward to be employed. So a drug test should be mandatory and should be periodic thereon so that you have something to look forward to do. If you know that you could be tested and once you fail, you leave your job, then perhaps you know you have to be more circumspect about
let me just interject because we are pressed for time now. We have a second topic to discuss. Exactly what is the mechanism of cooperation that you have seen from Kano and Oyo perhaps that you would like other states to emulate? What is it that the state governments, civil society and other groups are doing?
They're all together. In Kano, all these groups are all together. They're academicians, they're money people, the government and their traditional rulers. They all work in sync. In Oyo State, what he has done, wherever we had discovered cannabis farms in plantations that belong to government, and we have cleared it, the government has stepped in to give it to the communities around there and giving us some money for alternative development.
All right, thank you very much, Colonel Abdallah. Let's move quickly to the United Kingdom to get the final comment of Dr. Udenze.
Very much. Drug abuse is real. Addiction is here to stay. We can't get rid of it. We can only manage it. We need the concerted effort of government and non-governmental organizations to work on this project. But more importantly, I would really like to see Mr. President himself address this issue. In an article I wrote last week, I said, this issue is killing Nigerians. It's like a cancer. Mr. President, sir, should please address the nation on the subject matter only. We need a clear direction of travel on how we're going to deal with this issue. Thank you.
I want to thank you very much, Dr. Vincent Udeze, a psychiatrist that joined us from the United Kingdom. Let's move over quickly to Saddam. Saddam, I salute your courage. I'm glad that you came into the studio, and like you heard from our tweets, people are impressed that you came out to speak out. What are your final comments on this issue?
I would like to plead to the youths out there. It's possible. I know someone somewhere out there is thinking of a way out of his or her addiction. And it's possible. You could check into Synapse, Google it. If you really need help, you do need help, not like you really need help. Like, you guys, I just pray that God continue to grant us the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change, the courage to change the things that we can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
All right, thank you very much. And then let's hear from your dad, Alhaji Saidu. What's your word, as it were, to other parents who might be in a situation that you were in yourself a couple of years ago?
Well, it is the right thing to do is to be observant. Parenthood must be instituted in the family. No matter what you do, you must continue to observe your children at random, and then continue to build their confidence. Because one thing that makes them to go to peer group that will take you to negative side is a lack of confidence, your own self-confidence, that I am this and I'm okay like this. There's no need to copy that. Because when we're growing up, we've met people who drink. When it gets to the time to drink, you go back to your home. When they go and drink, they crash, they come back, you see them. You still maintain yourself. And that self-confidence is the most important thing that the children should, the parents should institute in their children.
All right, Alhaji Muhammad Abdullahi Saidu, right, father of Mr. Safiyanu Saddam Saidu, who is a student at the Federal University of Lokoja. Father and son would like to appreciate you very deeply for being with us on Good Morning Nigeria today.
It's our pleasure.
All right, we also would like to thank the chairman of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, that's retired Colonel Muhammad Mustafa Abdallah. Thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to coming to talk to Nigerians on drugs again.
And then also be on the field, cracking the heads of those who are in this business in terms of supplies. All right, so let's take a short break now. When we return, we'll be dealing with another subject matter, that's the Open Government Partnership Initiative.
Nigerians. Suicide bombers are not spirits. They are not ghosts. They are human beings like you and me. They live amongst us. They are your neighbors. They are your friends today, but terrorists tomorrow. So you must know your neighbor now. Security begins with you and me. Know your neighbor. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me.
If you see something, say something. Nigeria unite against terrorism. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
Whenever pain occurs, you want quick relief. Try Nurofen Express. It goes to the source of pain and gets to work in under 15 minutes. That's why Nurofen Express delivers fast and effective relief. Nurofen Express works at the source of pain, fast.
Being a mom is great, but when your child has a fever, you don't know what to do. I trust Nurofen for Children to take care of my child's pain and fever.
Effective relief you can trust.
All right, you're welcome back. If you're just tuning in, that's the last lap of Good Morning Nigeria for today. We just signed off our guests when we're discussing drug abuse and addiction in the country. Now, in 2016, Nigeria joined the Open Government Partnership Initiative, committing to an alliance for domestic reforms devoted to making government open, accountable, and responsive to citizens. Now, the alliance is a partnership between government ministries, departments, and agencies working in collaboration with civil society on specific commitments. All right, now that's the subject matter that we'll be taking on this morning. But our correspondent, Jide Onifade, has a background report. But if we are able to take that report, we'll take it before we introduce our three guests who are here with us in the studios.
The commitment to join the Open Government Partnership was made in 2016, and the commitment was finally fulfilled in July 2017, when the nation became the 70th country to join the International Multi-Stakeholder Initiative.
Since 2017, our annual national budgets have included a line item on revenue generated from asset recoveries. All funds forfeited to the federal government are being included in our yearly budget proposals for appropriation by the National Assembly. We've also committed to investing these recovered funds on infrastructure projects and our National Social Investment Program. In addition, we've submitted a bill to the National Assembly for the purpose of enacting a more comprehensive legislation on proceeds of crime.
Nigeria's We're now being joined in the studio by Juliet Ibe Kaku Nwagu. She's the SA to the President on Justice Sector Reform and coordinator of the Open Government Partnership in Nigeria. Welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Also in the studio is Dr. Tayo Adeloju of the OGP, and he's the incoming co-chair and Nigerian Economic Summit Group and senior fellow. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Tayo.
Thank you for having us. Good morning.
Kingsley.
All right, we have another guest who is here with us in the studios. It's Honorable Ejike Njeze. Njeze is CEO of PGL Nigeria and co-chair of the Technology and Innovation segment of the Open Government Partnership in Nigeria. Thanks a lot for being with us on the program this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right, let's get very quickly into the nitty-gritty of this conversation. Open Government Partnership in Nigeria, what is it all about and what does it aim to achieve? Let's begin with the essay to the President on Justice Sector Reforms.
I'm sure you heard the Vice President of Nigeria on Monday introduce formally what we are doing with the Open Government Partnership. Essentially,
our viewers may not have heard, so just tell
them. So
us.
It's essentially about improving transparency, accountability, and citizen participation in government. It's also something that will affect the way we prepare our budget. So we are looking at open budgeting process, working closely with the Ministry of Budget and Planning. We are working closely with the Bureau for Public Procurement on issues of open contracting, building platforms that will ensure that citizens can engage on our contracting process. We're looking at revenue transparency because Nigerians want to know what is happening with the government, what the government is doing with revenue, what the government is doing with our budget process, what the government is doing with the extractive industry transparency initiative. And so this whole process is about improving governance. It's also one of the pillars we use in fighting corruption. So when you talk about fight against corruption, you have the preventive pillar, sustainable approach to fighting corruption, and then you have the enforcement pillar. And the president, by signing on to the OGP, saying to Nigeria, even when I'm not here, the fight against corruption will continue because I'm already integrating it within the ministries, within the agencies, and within the departments.
So in other words, it's all about creating a structure, which sounds interesting. How do you intend to use this to improve citizens' engagement? Because I know that's something the electorate is craving for.
So within the National Action Plan, this is one of the documents we are using for this program this week. It sets out different agendas that we have set for ourselves. We have 4 thematic areas: physical transparency, we have access to information, we have anti-corruption, and we have what we call citizen engagement. So citizen engagement is a very broad pillar with 3 commitments that speaks to permanent dialogue mechanism between the citizens and the government. And we have what we call technology platform, and Mr. Ejike will be speaking to that. That technology platform talks about how we engage with citizens using different platforms. Like I've already mentioned, the Budget Office now have what we call the iMonitor and Citizens Guide for Budgeting. If you go to the Budget Office website now, you will see the iMonitor, you will see the citizen engagement guidance that tells citizens on a day-to-day basis, this is what is happening with our budget. The BPP, that's the procurement agency, also have what they call the National Open Contracting Platform and the Citizen Working Group. So we're encouraging every department and agency to open up discussions. The National Orientation Agency is with us the whole of this week, discussing how they will engage at the local government level. And we now have 5 states that have joined the OGP, and we are broadening that engagement at the local level, at the state level, and at the federal level.
All right, thank you very much. Dr. Tayo Adeloju, tell us some more about the Open Government Partnership Initiative at work.
Well, from a citizen's point of view, opacity of government is a problem. It means that what government collects in terms of revenue, how that is budgeted, how it's applied to deliver developmental benefits that citizens can feel and experience is a question in the minds of the general populace. What that means is higher opacity leads to citizen distrust. Not necessarily because of what government is saying is not correct, but is not seen to be open. So the concept of openness of government begins with government being transparent, government being visible, for citizens to not just be told, but to see themselves that the processes of governance is open to all. So access to information is crucial. And that brings us, of course, to the question of the impact of an open government on the environment. As you know, there's a direct correlation between the ease of doing business, which is one of the commitments of the Open Government Partnership, and the ability for our environment to be easier to do business in and to be more transparent to the global community that we keep saying to come and invest in Nigeria. So the key benefit is, one, citizens are more open to participating. The Open Government Partnership is co-creation. The action plan is not a government action plan. It was co-created between government and civil society. The implementation is not done by government alone. It is co-implemented by government and civil society. And the reporting, monitoring, and accountability is also co-created, so that it's not government alone saying this is what we are doing. It's citizens looking at what government is doing and saying... Is
this a matter that is domiciled, for instance, say in the executive branch alone? Because in a democracy, you would say checks and balances. Is the legislature part of this, Mrs. Nwagu?
So we have a national steering committee that is made up of half of government, about 21 members of government institutions, including the judiciary and the National Assembly. We have 21 government, civil society organizations and private sector. This is why the Nigerian Economic Summit Group is here as an incoming co-chair. So there is an interaction, an everyday interaction going on between the civil society, the business organizations, and government.
All right, let's move quickly to Honorable AGK. The SAD talk about technology platforms, which you will be talking about. Now, while telling us more about that, I'd also like you to remember that at the grassroots, most people do not have access to technology. So can you tell us how you intend to handle those at the grassroots while emphasizing on the use of technology to drive this project?
Absolutely. Just like my colleague have said, the concept of open government partnership is centered around the citizens getting more involved and getting more aware of what's happening around the governance sector. And the whole idea is making government more accountable, the governance processes more transparent, and then building that confidence between the citizens and the government. And the most important tool for reaching out to the citizens today, as we know, is the use of technology. But like you said, there are citizens that are located at the very underserved, area parts of the country. Talking about people at the rural areas. But you also agree with me that even at the remotest part of this country, greater population of our citizens still have access to the basic mobile phones. Talking about the mobile phones that are not smart. Now, what we have done in the OGP is also to take into account those underserved communities, underserved locations of this country, where you have greater population of our citizens that needs to be aware of what's happening within the government sector. And then what we have done is to incorporate what we call the USSD technology, which doesn't necessarily have to do with having access to the internet to communicate. You just need the basic connection. to the mobile, network. And how that works is that, you can just use your normal 3310, the normal basic Nokia phones to send a certain short code that will be redirected to the OGP portal, that is the Open Government portal. Permit me to also let you know that we have built and we are still in the process of establishing more technology, infrastructures, and platforms that will help, that will facilitate this citizens' engagement we're talking about. So, we have, actually what I'm saying in essence is that we have not forgotten that there are people and greater population that are located in places where there are no access to internet. So we have factored all of that into the technology framework that we are, establishing.
All right, Mr. Joseph, thank you very much. Back again to the essay on justice sector reform. Is the Open Government Partnership Initiative, is it a surplusage? Or how does it, for instance, relate to pre-existing pieces of legislation and indeed practices? I'll give you some examples. Freedom of information is there. And then you also have the oversight by the legislature. And then you have the Auditor General, either at the state level or at the federal level, having their own oversights and then reporting on government budgets and expenditures.
So this integrates, the OGP integrates all of what you've just said now. If you recall, I mentioned access to information as one of the pillars we have. Under access to information, we're implementing the Freedom of Information Act. We can't have access when there's no law underpinning that framework. So we've aggregated all the laws that exist on anti-corruption today. We have all the agencies working with us as part of the National Steering Committee. So this is not a surplus. What it has done is an aggregation and collation of existing infrastructures that we have, whether it's law, policies, or whatever it is. And we are saying, how do we use all of this to improve transparency and accountability and citizen engagement? So if we take, for example, asset recovery, which is already embedded in some of our laws, maybe not fully. The one thing we haven't done is, what about the transparency of the management of assets? This is what the OGP is doing now. OGP is saying that we can manage our assets in a more transparent manner. We can engage citizens more. And we can say to citizens, this is what we're recovering, this is how we're recovering, this is where we're expending it on. Access to information, we have within the commitment we made where we said freedom of information compliance is key to enable us achieve our open government, to enable us achieve transparency in the extractive industry, for example.
All right, that's the most that we can take. We are pressed for time now. I was going to ask Dr. Adeloju, look, all of this bottom line, a Nigerian on the street will ask himself, what does this do to my stomach infrastructure?
It delivers at the end the capacity for service delivery to citizens, which ties into resource transparency, how it's applied. The greater the transparency and accountability for our resources, the more benefits will now be available to the citizen on the street because of improved governance investments.
All right, Dr. Tayo Adeloju of the Nigerian Economic Summit Group, thanks a lot for being with us on the program this morning.
Thank you, sir.
We also would like to appreciate Honorable Ejike Njeze, who is involved in the Open Government Partnership at the ICT level. Thanks a lot for being around today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks also to Juliet Nwago, essay to the President on Justice Sector Reform and coordinator of the OGP, that's Open Government Partnership Initiative in Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you.
All right, Zoom in Nigeria, let's go very quickly to our foreign desk to take one of our segments.
Western powers say they are committed to the Iran nuclear deal after President Donald Trump announced that the U.S. was withdrawing from the agreement. The UK, France and Germany urged the U.S. not to obstruct its implementation. They said they will work with other signatories to the 2015 deal, Russia and China, which have stressed continuing support for the deal. In response, Iran said it will restart uranium enrichment if the agreement could not be salvaged. In a statement, President Hassan Rouhani said he has ordered the foreign ministry to negotiate with European countries, China and Russia, in the coming weeks. The deal was agreed between Iran and the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, the US, UK, France, China and Russia, plus Germany. Iran insists its nuclear program is entirely peaceful and its compliance with the deal has been verified by the International Atomic Energy Agency.
Thank you, Natal. Now let's join the Nigerian Meteorological Agency for the weather outlook for the rest of the day.
Hello, and thank you for joining us on the weather segment from the Nigerian Meteorological Agency. I am Lisa Helen Bui. Localized thunderstorms are anticipated over Bauchi, Gombe, and Maiduguri axis. The central cities should be predominantly cloudy, although 1 or 2 drops of rains over Abuja and Jos are not unlikely. Isolated thunderstorms are also expected over Benin and Asaba axis in the morning hours. As the day progresses, we'll expect build-up of these weather activities, which could lead to isolated thunderstorms over Yolua, Bauchi, Gombe, Ilorin, Yola, Oka, Ado-Ekiti, Akure, Enugu, and the coastal states. For the maximum temperatures across some selected cities, do stand by.
All right, Joy.
And that's Good Morning Nigeria today. See you tomorrow for another edition. I am Joy Oseago.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join Joy in thanking you for being with us today. We're back tomorrow same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Do enjoy the rest of your day.